Hi, welcome back to Season 2 of Reppin, a podcast about all things representation, from race, gender, orientation, to personal representation like ideas, values, and beliefs. I'm Evelyn, a television producer director with over 25 years of experience, and I want this podcast to be a place where you'll meet notable people and hear some of their experiences that gives you insight towards who they really are and what they stand for. Some episodes were recorded prior to the coronavirus pandemic, so I hope that this finds you and yours all well and safe, and that this podcast gives you a bit of a break and reminds you of all the compassion, strength, and goodness that's out there. Having said that, I'm excited to kick off Season 2 of Reppin with an incredibly talented actress with a stunning list of credits that include New York Undercover, The Cosby Mysteries, the iconic series Law & Order and Law & Order SVU, The Fugitive, Daredevil, ER, Gossip Girl, Blue Bloods, Hawaii Five-0, Younger, Blind Spot, woo, and it just keeps going on. And most recently, you can see her as Raffi on Star Trek Picard. You'll see she's not only incredibly talented, but she's a wonderful human being, and you'll love her as much as I do. Today, we're kicking off Season 2 with the amazing Michelle Hurd. First of all, Michelle, thank you so much. I love seeing you.
Love seeing you too. Love being here with you.
How have you been?
I've been good. I'm having a great job and I'm really enjoying myself.
So, Michelle, at this point in the show, usually I like to tell the audiences a list of your credits, but let me ask you this. With you, I think the question would be, what show haven't you been on?
I know, right? Well, it's funny, I have to say, as an actor and as a journeyman actor, because I'm really a journeyman actor. I was never like the ingenue or whatever. After working for so long, I started to do this. I had this sort of like game with myself. I wanted to get on any show that I watched, and I wanted to be on every network that's on TV. And so that every network and every studio would know who I am. So that's literally what I would actively do when I would audition for stuff.
That's amazing. I think goal accomplished.
Yep. Thank you. So do I.
You did the first 2 seasons of Law & Order SVU.
Mm-hmm.
You and I obviously met on Blind Spot.
Mm-hmm.
But you've been on 90210, you've been on Hawaii Five-0.
Lethal Weapons, ER. I mean, just keeps going. It keeps going.
It keeps going. So you are the real deal. But let's talk about when you first started. I mean, back in the day of like Law & Order SVU. But your career started even before that.
Yeah. Yes. My when I got out of college, I graduated Boston University School for Theater Arts, and I'm a New Yorker, native New Yorker, Greenwich Village.
Yeah, girl.
Hey. So I came back to the city, and I started doing theater. Just like all kinds of theater, stage readings, Lord ABCD, off Broadway, off Broadway, and Broadway. There was at one point where I said I had to go to like no paying theater gigs anonymous because like the phone would ring, I'd pick it up and I'd go yes, and hang it up. Damn it! I said yes again. But there's no better way as an actor to get your legs and to get your skills up to par other than being on stage in front of a live audience. From that, I found that I love doing theater, but I wasn't making any money, and I'm a terrible waitress. I mean, like, no joke. I'm a terrible, like I even registered with a temp agency, and the temp agency sent me out to an office one day, and that office called the temp agency at the end of the day and said, never send her out again. I was terrible. I literally was like, I'd pick up the phone and I'd try to push the buttons. And it was just dreadful. So I realized that I needed to start making money. And that's when I started to, I actually did extra work, tons and tons of extra work in movies and TV shows and commercials. And so much so that there was and this is dating myself, but whatever, when they were shooting Kings of New York with Christopher Walken, directed by Abel Ferrari, there was an actress didn't show up to be Roger Smith's wife. And because I'd done so much extra work in ADs and they all knew me. They literally looked in the audience like, Michelle, come here. And I was like, whoop, great. And I was all of a sudden they gave me the wife of Roger Smith. So from there, I just started trying to seek out more on-camera stuff because you can make money. And I worked on a soap opera. on Another World. Yep, Another World was my very first.
Oh my God, when they were back in Brooklyn.
When they were back in Brooklyn, actually, absolutely. And I played Dana Kramer, 88 Dana Kramer. So I was a lawyer, a district attorney. And I remember my very first day on set. I'm like straight out of college, 20, whatever, 21, 22. And it was opening arguments to a jury, and all of the sort of, soap opera divas or whatever were in the scene. And I'm standing up there about to give an opening statement. Like my knees were shaking. I'm trying to be really cool. Like, oh, this is no problem. I mean, it was talking about like trying to get your energy over the hump there. But so I did that, and from that I just started doing on camera stuff.
Yeah, you have a really crazy list of credits. Now, you said you were a New Yorker, and going back, I guess a way to say this is, in some ways, we, both of us being minorities, we're fortunate to grow up in a city like New York that had so much diversity. However, having said that, media and entertainment wasn't very diverse at that point.
Oh, no. Yeah.
So can you tell me some of the inspirations or influences you had or didn't have when you were just starting out in the extra world?
Yeah.
Because your list of credits, girl, are no joke. Back in the day, starting out, you didn't see a lot of people that looked like you or me. There wasn't really any kind of diversity. I mean, I don't think that's something that's happened until very recently.
Until recently, absolutely. Yeah, I remember actually, because I'm biracial. My mother's white and my father's black. My mother's born in Blackwell, Oklahoma. I mean, there were like no black people where she grew up. And my dad is Jamaican, but grew up in Harlem. I remember going into my commercial agent and sitting and talking to them when you first interview with them. And I remember one of the agents asked me where I feel like I fit in, like where do I associate myself? And I knew what he was asking me. I absolutely knew that he was asking me, do I tag along to the black people, or do I tag along to the white people? Where do I put myself? And my answer to him was, I'm an actress. So give me dialogue, give me a story, and I will bring that to life. That's what I identify with. And if you need me to categorize myself as to put a title on me, then put me as a New Yorker, because that's who I am.
That is awesome. That's so badass.
You have to. Well, because it's such a strange concept to sort of ask me to own or disown a parent. Because, if I say I'm black, well, where's my mom? My mother carried me, and if I say I'm white, and I'm clearly not, because as soon as I walk into a room, people know that I'm some type of minority. So I find that it was one of those moments where you have to really claim yourself, your person, and not sort of, be pigeonholed into what other people view you as. We have more to offer. Ask me something, hear my voice, and then you'll know who I am. And that's kind of how I've always walked in this earth, truthfully. And, I've never saw, like, for growing up, I didn't see myself represented at all. I'd watch a TV show or a movie and I thought I was the princess. And not till I got to a place where people, were in charge, did I realize that they saw me not as the princess, but as the maid. And from that moment, I thought, well, that's your perception of me, because my perception is I'm the princess. I've never played a princess, by the way, but you know what I mean.
You're a badass. You've played every badass in the universe.
Well, that was the other thing, is that when I started getting options of choosing parts and stuff, my for sure, if there was an option between wearing heels or carrying a gun, I would choose the gun every time. I was like, oh no, this is the boss lady. This boss. I'm not a girlfriend. I'm the boss.
I need to repeat this again. I fucking love Michelle Hurd. Fucking love her.
I love you too, honey.
But I have to go back. I have to go back to something, because I'm literally like struck by what you just said. Like, how old were you when you said, I'm a New Yorker, I'm not one or the other? Because I'll be honest with you, when I first started in this business, I wasn't even sure that it was something for me, because on one hand, culturally, I hate to say stereotypes, but there was a hope for me to do something more practical, more stable. My parents were scared shitless that I wasn't going to be able to get a job. Just, background aside, just getting a job.
Right.
And then, there were no Asian people in media. And my parents were immigrants. So, we landed in Staten Island and I was like, how the fuck am I going to get from Staten Island to Hollywood?
Right.
Like, how the hell do you get there? So I think if someone said to me, where do you see yourself? I honestly can tell you, I don't know I would have the sensibility or the strength or security to say what you said. So roughly how old were you at that time? And where did you get that? I don't need, like, what would you call it? Wherewithal? Balls? Courage?
Yeah, balls. I think, yeah, all that. I was definitely in my 20s because it was after college.
Right.
Honestly, I feel when you grow up in a household of, a biracial household,
right,
in a time where that's not really popular. In fact, I remember like my mom, when she, was walking down the street with the three girls, with myself and my two sisters. I remember somebody came up to us and they thought she was the babysitter. And because she was like, there's, you don't have children in this day and age with a Black person. That would be crazy. And I think growing up with such an awareness of the fact that we were minorities and that we were in the taboo thing. I mean, my mom's family kind of disowned her for a period of time. She has 5 brothers. They didn't speak to her until we got much older. My father's parents were receptive, but they're Jamaican, and so literally, like, when they would go over to visit with, like, my father and my mother would go over to visit them, my grandmother would have like a single Jamaican woman there, like, oh, Hugh, look who we got here. We got a nice lady who want to come and say hello to you. He's married, and she'd still have, like, there's a Jamaican single lady for him. So we were very aware of being others. By growing up in the village, Greenwich Village, and Westbeth Artist Housing, we literally lived in the neighborhood and in a building where there were all others. My neighbor, her father transitioned while we were growing up. So, other people see the TV series Transparent. We lived the series Transparent. That wasn't something new. That was just my friend Rachel's parent.
And this was back in the day.
This is back in the day, honey. This is back in the day.
So he really trailblazed.
Yep. This is when Greenwich Village was really Greenwich Village, that it was only filled with artists and gay people. So it was really, we were all very aware of who we are, but we were all, as a community, we were supportive of each other. It's interesting that I'm doing Star Trek because Star Trek was one of the only shows that my father would let us see because it was inclusive. Honestly, swear to God, there were shows that my father did, plays and films that he played sort of, like, not, I don't want to say Uncle Tom's, but the butler or this or that, and he wouldn't let us see it because he didn't want us to see him in that representation.
Got it.
So I was never not aware of the fact that we were minorities and different. Gotcha. Exactly. I will say, though, and this is back in the day, but when I went to college in Boston, very quickly, I was alerted to the fact that I was a minority, like instantly. I think in college, I played every single different ethnic character that came up. And at one point I had to say to the teachers, I was like, look, you guys, the one thing I don't have to work on is being a minority. I got that down, like down, hands tied behind my back. I'm a fucking minority. I rule. I walk into a room, somebody's like, minority, I don't need that. But, I said to them that the reason I came to college, just like these other people, is the opportunity to play Juliet. And you guys are not letting that happen. So I was all fire and brimstone even in college.
I am a fan. I love the story of Star Trek. And speaking of Star Trek, you are on Picard.
I'm on Picard.
Holy shit, that's huge.
Holy shit, exactly.
So for those who don't know, set up the premise of what Picard is, your character, how it fits into the plot.
Yes, so Star Trek Picard is, Patrick Stewart left Star Trek about 18 years ago. So this show, Star Trek Picard, picks up that same amount of time that he's been off screen. So Patrick and Picard have aged 20 years. So that's where our story picks up is to find out where Picard is in those 20 years, how that has affected him, and what his dreams and hopes are now, which is the same thing that's happened with Patrick. These 20 years have had an impact on him, where we are in society and in politics. It affects all of us. How do we navigate now? I love our executive producers and our writers because they are just like Star Trek has always been. It holds a mirror up to society. We are affected by what is happening now. We're trying to create a way for, in an entertainment way, that we can address the issues that we're all sort of feeling like we're trapped with, and hopefully show hope, which is what Star Trek has always been about: inclusion,
right,
and hope and humanity.
Yes.
That's what Picard is all about. And Raffi she used to work with Picard back in the Federation day, back like 15 years ago.
Right.
She, with the Federation, has a really complicated relationship, and they had a falling out. She also had a bit of a falling out with Picard. So when he is, he's trying to help this individual, this person who comes to him for help, the Federation's not interested in helping him. The Federation has changed, just like our government changes, and sometimes you trust them and sometimes you don't. And right now there's an issue of trust with the Federation. And so he comes to me to sort of gather up a motley crew and get a ship and go on a quest to help this individual out.
Tell me a little bit about your character. Like, how would you describe her? Because she's kind of a badass.
Oh, I love Raffi. I think she's one of my favorite characters I've ever had the opportunity to bring to life, and it's because she is so perfectly imperfect. She is haunted. She's haunted by decisions and choices that she's made, regrets that she has, some situations that have happened to her, some things that she has caused herself. Because of these haunting regrets, she has vices. She's got some addictions. She leans on alcohol and on a horgol, and these are crutches for her. But it was really important for me to tell this story of an addict, because as a New Yorker, I think of addiction, and you think of like the person who's nodding out on the side of the street from heroin, or
right,
the like drug addicts or alcoholics,
Right.
But I really wanted to tell the story because we all have this person in our lives, whether they're in our family, their friends, their associates, or you don't even know about it, that are struggling with addiction so much so that they're doing their very, very best just to get up in the day. They're not drinking or smoking so they can get high and kick back on the couch. They're doing those things because it's almost impossible for them to open the shade and look out the window.
It's coping.
To cope, to pick up the phone and to speak with someone, to become part of society. These people who are going through this addiction, this, depression, the demon on the shoulder, are still viable. They're still valuable to society. They can still contribute. We shouldn't push them aside. We shouldn't write them off. We shouldn't just go, oh, well, they went down that hole, that rabbit hole, and we'll never get them back. They're still part of our community and our society and our valued beings, and should be supported, and there should be a hand, reaching out to help them up. Raffi is going through all those things. She's got challenges, and she's doing her very, very best just to get up in the day.
It's a fucking great show.
It's a fucking great show. It really is.
And I remember how excited you were when you got it, and I was so excited for you. Star Trek is obviously a hugely successful franchise, and I think that would still be an understatement. But I think you also said it best. Star Trek has been, I think, even back in the day, trailblazer in terms of diversity, a trailblazer in terms of using this fantastic sci-fi vehicle, but at the core of it, it is a mirror to what we're going through. It is addressing social issues that are pretty tricky. Yeah. And so I want you to talk about, being a part of, first, a franchise that is just, there's a reason why they're called Trekkies.
Yeah.
They are rabid fans. Yeah. Being a part of a franchise that is decades long and still going strong, and deservedly so. And then on top of that, talking about issues that matter. Mm-hmm. And let's talk about also, Star Trek was one of the few shows that you watched as a child, and now
That's
you're
right.
on that show.
I know, it's crazy, as a family. Yeah, I think the thing that, what's so interesting, and especially because you know the shows that I've been on, and even like Blind Spot or whatever, I think I've done like 4 different Dick Wolf shows. I'm like a Dick Wolf kid. I'm procedural. I can, spew exposition like nobody's business. I can validate a scene. I can walk in and give you a report card and walk out, and everybody's good. And I think I always thought that procedurals are the way to push agendas. It's contemporary and it seems timely, and so that's the way you can push agendas. I didn't realize until I got on the show that sci-fi is where you can push agendas. Literally.
Tell me more about it.
Science fiction in general and Star Trek specifically has always wanted to tackle the complexities of humanity and the relationships between people. It's always been about, inclusion, exclusion, otherisms, immigration.
Yes.
Racism, bigotry, oppression. And it's every single thing. And what I love about it is that we're able to tell those stories under this umbrella of sci-fi. So you could sit there and you're watching it. You don't feel like you're being preached to, or berated.
Right.
But at the end of an episode, you sort of get a feeling like, that actually hit me.
Yeah.
That's actually pertinent. Like, I can relate to that.
It's like slipping the vegetables in with the dessert.
Exactly. It's literally...
That sounded gross, but sorry.
I love that. You've pureed the broccoli and it's in the cheesecake. Exactly.
Yes.
That's literally... And I think, what an honor it is, especially being a person of color,
right?
Being a minority, knowing, like, as I said, when we were kids, my father would encourage us to sit around the table or sit around the living room and watch Star Trek solely because it was the only show at that time that had, multiple different looking people, different colors. I mean, like, there were people who were blue and like people who had horns, but that's otherisms, right? That's, That's bringing other people into the same thing. Like bringing people, nowadays we would try to say that that's bringing in LGBTQ people, bringing in disabled people, which is we're still lacking of inclusive with them. They're here. They're part of our community. They should be in every room.
Ageism too?
Ageism. I mean, and I have to say, this is one of the things that I actually really love about our show. There's not very many shows where you get the perspective of a person of a certain age who sees their mortality. And this show is literally from that perspective, which is valuable because we have a ton of people who are living in that perspective right now, who are not represented. We have all these cute, sassy shows of these young leads running up and down, but you don't have someone who's actually the one who pays all the bills.
Right.
The fact that back in the day, Star Trek was the very first show to have an interracial kiss on television.
I know.
For me, that was like watching my parents, like you actually saw what was happening in your house represented on television,
right?
Which people, all being completely full disclosure, people who are white don't realize that the stories that are told aren't told from our perspective. It's only told from their perspective. I say this all the time about scripts. Scripts come into our house. My husband's an actor. He's a white man. And, you'll get a bunch of scripts that you're trying to figure out if you read for interest. And whenever I read them, it's one of my pet peeves. I read the script and it has like, Mary walking down the street, da, 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 she runs into John and blah, 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 blah. They see Sarah and blah, 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 blah. And then Jose, Latino, da, da, da. Monique, black, da, da. I'm like, wait. Why are you talking? Why do we, have to identify these individuals as minorities?
Right.
And then you sort of go, oh, I see. Because the person who wrote this, who's white, is making the assumption that the world they see is white.
Right.
So they're making an assumption that when I read it, Mary, Joe, and John are white. But they don't understand that my perspective is a multicultural world.
Right.
So when I'm reading it, Mary may look like me or like you,
right?
Or it, it doesn't necessarily mean white,
right?
So like one of my things is that I would love, and I think it would make a step towards people being understanding and empathetic of people of color, is if they want to write scripts and you want to, identify when there's a minority, fine, but identify when there's a white person too. Every single time there's an individual, tell me their ethnicity. If you feel the need to tell me when there's a minority, then tell me when there's the majority. Don't make the assumption that the person who's reading your script is from the same perspective.
The other thing, just jumping on that in some ways is like, it annoys me that anytime I see a minority of Asian, it's like our character names are like, Chang Fei or some shit.
Right.
Like, why can't my name be Meg?
Right. Exactly.
Why do the characters all have these like cliche archetype names? So I totally get you, but there's something that I wanted to kind of go back to. I mean, I know you work your ass off at every show. Did you ever take a minute to think about, okay, when you and I were growing up, I looked at Star Trek. I mean, I have to admit, I like Star Trek, but I'm not like, you're not going to come to my house and I'm going to greet you at the door with a jumper.
Right. Very good.
That's not me.
Not that the people who have those are,
it's
go
all
right
good.
ahead.
Passion is good. I'm all about that. But, we looked at that and, I saw George Takei and there was obviously, again, diversity. And it was big for you as a kid, right? Because it opened doors. It was the only show that we saw our pieces of ourselves. But how does it hit you, Michelle? Because I don't know if you've ever had to taken a moment to actually sit back and be like, what those talented actors and those storylines did for you as a kid, you are continuing to do for others. Can you talk about how that impacts you?
Oh, I'm very aware of it. I'm, and truth be told, I think I've been really conscientious of that reality in all of the choices I've taken whenever I work, because I was so uber aware of the fact that I was not represented on television. Right. I didn't see myself, because it's difference between, like just seeing a Black woman and then seeing a mixed woman, because I'm mixed, Right. Issa Briones, the other girl who's on my show, who's Eurasian, we talk about that often, that we are actually giving people of diverse backgrounds, an opportunity to see themselves validated in entertainment. And it sounds kind of like weird, like who cares about being validated in entertainment? But it's bigger than we realize, because art is like, art's the common language between everybody, right? Like you can see a painting, you could speak English, French, Italian, Russian, whatever, but we all see the same painting, right? We all see the same art, and it's going to affect us in a different way.
Right.
That's it. So by doing this, we're giving people of different colors, of shades, people of color, the awareness that they are part of society. I equate it like this, growing up in certain schools, you would sit in your classroom in like first, second, third, fourth grade or whatever, and they'd have the pictures of the presidents around the room, right?
Right.
For the longest time, obviously up until Obama, they were just all a bunch of old white men, right? Period. So we don't know, like, consciously or unconsciously what that does to us, right? So unconsciously, we have above us just a whole bunch of, old white men being the rulers, not a woman, not a minority. So subconsciously, it tells me that is not where I can be, right?
Right.
Now I have two nephews. Today's my Lucien's 16th birthday. One's 16 and one's 13. And all I can think about was that when they were younger, they now see a Black man up in that thing. So subconsciously, consciously, whichever way, they know that they can do that, they're part of that world now, that they can achieve that because they see themselves.
Right.
So by being a minority on television, we are basically giving them that moment and giving people who have color that information that we are here, we are valid, we're included in this world. So I'm really conscious. It's also one of the reasons why the parts that I've taken have always been sort of boss women, because I really want to be a strong representation. I never really enjoy being the girlfriend or the wife or I'm the wife on Hawaii Five-0 because I love Shy McBride. And I will do that every now and then because as a woman of a certain age, that's the roles you get. But I really wanted to make the foundation of my jobs for young ladies of color to be about strength, intelligence, power, command of a situation, and to give them that template that they could go forward. It's important.
I think that's amazing. I mean, but just also landing on such an iconic franchise like Star Trek, and now you're on Picard. You're standing on the shoulders of the casts that originated the series and all of the incarnations that sort of preceded you.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're continuing that, and you have the awareness to continue to pay it forward and to shape viewpoints. That's huge. I mean, that's a huge responsibility, Michelle. I mean, I've always known you to be that person, but I think what's really important also is just as I know you and as you talk, we're also understanding a lot of your values and your perspectives and your principles that you fight so hard for. In terms of just navigating the very uncertain world that we're living in right now.
Yep.
I mean, there are so many complicated problems, and these are really troubling times.
Yeah.
But you also are fiercely active in the Time's Up. You are always about empowering other people. Clearly, you're talking about this now, even just in your day-to-day. How did you get involved with Time's Up? Tell us what Time's Up is, the movement, because sometimes people might get a little bit confused with all the different movements that are happening.
Sure.
Tell me what that is and why that was important for you to get involved.
Yeah. Time's Up it's very interesting because people, I think, may perceive Time's Up as this sort of group of actors for some reason that, like a bunch of actresses got together and they're like, Time's up, let's stop, pay, give us money, give us better jobs. That's not what it's about. Not so much.
Okay.
Time's Up is actually a legal defense fund for people who have been harassed in all formats, whether that's sexually harassed with intimidation, felt to be unsafe at work, discriminated against. And this is in all vocations.
So not just in entertainment
at all. Like we're like minimal of it. We have a lot of Time's Up events where we gather people together. And then we had this one day called Day of Listening. And we had women from all different vocations, from the hospitality industry, from the restaurant industry, from the farmers groups, the Olympic athletes, sports anchors, so many people. And all these women, we broke up into little groups and we told stories about situations that have happened to us. And I can't even tell you, I have a real hard time with injustice. It's really hard for me to sit still and to hear these women talk about the situations that they've been put in and been forced to accept egregious actions against them, forced to succumb to physical engagements against their will. It's so frustrating. So this Time's Up, which did sort of get galvanized by a bunch of actors. And, I can only say that the beautiful thing about that is that we had a platform for us to jump from so that people could hear and see us. And so now we're here. I
mean, that's the advantage, right, of working in entertainment and media, is that we have a platform.
And it's almost our duty to pay it back that way. I've been given this forum, so let me give this back. But what it actually is for anybody who feels that they need help. Time's Up has already connected over 4,000 people with lawyers. I think we fully funded about 60 plus cases. We changed earlier this year with Governor Cuomo's help. We changed the statute of limitation for rape in second and third degree. So we're changing legislation, which is the part that I really love, because I want to, I'm not just here to yell, but I will yell. But I'm here to change laws, because it's time to change laws. We're connecting with the women's soccer team right now to start pushing
the U.S. women's soccer team.
Yes, to push equal pay forward, because it's time for equal pay to be front and center.
Yes.
So Time's Up is a lot more than just a bunch of celebrity actors doing a PSA. It's actually for every person out there, because men are abused as well. But every person out there who are scared, feel alone, know that there has been some egregious acts acted against them, and we are giving them the opportunity to have legal defense funds and representation. On to one of the reasons why I am the person I am, this activist and this actress. And we had started to touch upon it when we're talking about this time and this climate, and how really frustrating and stifling and almost petrified it makes us feel.
Paralyzing.
Paralyzing. There's the word I'm looking for. I talk to my mother. My father's passed now, but I talk to my mother and say, gosh, Mom, things are so crazy. I can only try to think about what it was like when you were with Daddy, how crazy it must have been then. Because when my father and my mother were married, that was back when Dr. King got assassinated, Malcolm X got assassinated.
Right.
JFK was assassinated. Bobby was assassinated. It literally felt like the sky was falling down. And so I said to her, during that time, what did you guys think? What were you think? Like, how did you get up in the morning? What did you think? And she said, well, we weren't going anywhere. We were not going to go anywhere. We were here. We're here and we're going to stay here. And we're going to, solidify our roots into this world. There's no way that they're going to push us away. So, so even when the sky is falling, we all have to remember that we're here. We're here and we're not going to be silenced. We're not going anywhere. That if we can just breathe, calm down, and remember that we're the majority, we can make change. My dad and Maya Angelou would gather and make, they had something called the Matinee for Freedom, where they would gather all these artists of different, races to sing, perform, do a cabaret to raise money for Dr. King's marches. I mean, my father at the age of 18 was a liberator in the Second World War of Dachau. He tells about a story of being a part of a black battalion at 18 years old, going into the Dachau. And if if we all know the war, that when World War II was ending, the Nazis tried to cover their tracks and would just kill the prisoners. And so he walked through the gates and there were bonfires of bodies. And he says that he remembers the smell and the silence. And then all of a sudden they started to see movements. And he said it almost seemed like there were the wood in the wall started to move. He said it just seemed like people started taking, like arms and hands started coming out of the woodwork.
Oh my God.
They were skeletal. These were prisoners. And they started saying black angels, because they knew these were black soldiers. They weren't Nazis.
Wow. So
they were the safest thing. They knew black angels. Cut to a couple decades later, my dad's on the bus here in New York City and he sees somebody trying to get on the bus, and the person makes eye contact with him, and he's New Yorkers were like, what are you looking at? And he sort of blow him away, and the guy got on the bus, and my dad said that he felt really uncomfortable because he could tell this guy was looking at him. My dad was like, all right, I'm out of here. I'm going to get off the bus. Started to get off the bus, and the person reached out, touched his hand, and said, black angel.
Oh my God.
Do you think I could forget the face of the man who saved me? So, this is the household that I grew up in. And by the way, just to get full disclosure of the country that we live in, my dad at 18 experienced all that right after the war. When he came back to the States, he couldn't, a cab would still not stop for him. So with that kind of an understanding, that's the household I came from. And I it became really clear that we can't be intimidated. We can't be pushed down. I want to fight for individuals whose voices have been silenced. It's one of the biggest things that I'm trying to get because I'm part of SAG-AFTRA's board. I'm part of, Time's Up.
Right.
I want inclusion in every single room. I feel like there should be a minority representation. There should be multiple women, and there should be LGBTQ people as well as disabled people in every room. Because when you have someone of all those parties in every room, the perspective and the conversation broadens.
Amen. My God. Oh my God. All I keep saying is I fucking love you.
I don't know what, and I just spewed a whole bunch of stuff there too. That was a ton.
That story about your father and also his encounter on the bus was incredible. My God, that was so powerful. But based on some of the things that we talked about and some of the problems that we're facing in this world, it's hard for me not to be completely paralyzed.
Sure.
And feel so defeated.
Sure.
In a lot of situations that are happening around the world. But where do you get this insatiable hunger for justice and also the fight that you are able to overcome this complete paralyzation that a lot of people are feeling?
It's really interesting because I'm curious as to the answer to that too. Sometimes, how is it that I find myself here? What am I doing?
Right.
But I have to say, every time I'm on my way to either a Time's Up meeting or a SAG-AFTRA, meeting, or the sexual harassment code of conduct committee, or, any of these things, as I'm walking, I'm like, what are we doing? Why am I here in this space? And as soon as I walk in the room and we begin the discussion, I realize why. Because I can't sit by idly when there's injustice. I just can't.
Right.
I just can't. It's something against my whole DNA.
That's great.
it could be because I'm a stubborn, New Yorker. I think I'm empathetic to a fault at times because I feel so much, and I'm pained when somebody is in pain,
right,
and they feel that they can't do anything. Then I feel like, well, then fuck it. Let me figure out what I can do, because I'm not going to sit. Nobody's tying my hands. So I think it really comes from, first of all, growing up in the village, where everybody was taboo. Every
Right.
single person in the village is basically a taboo sort of, thing. I remember really young, walking down the street. West Beth is over on Bethune Street, between Greenwich Street and Washington. And that street used to be called Hugh Hurd's Way, like we would refer to it, my father's name, because if you were walking down that street and you saw my dad, he would stop you and talk to you for like 5 hours about just what's going on. And I remember one day we stopped, and this man who happened to be gay was telling us about he and his partner being beaten up, and that some people had come into the village and beat the shit out of them because they're gay. And I was a child, and I remember him saying, how horrible it is that people will beat you up for who you love. He said, if I was in a room and the lights were out and my heart responded to another heart, how can that be wrong? Just because I turn the light on and it's a man. And from that moment on, I thought, that's absolutely right. Nobody has the right to extinguish anybody's flame.
Right.
It's just, I can't conceive of it. I don't understand.
Right.
And as I said, that was as a little child. I was probably like 5, 6, or 7.
Right.
So I was walking with my dad. But from growing up with parents that are mixed and activists and artists, I understood the power of the tool of artistry to connect people, and the power and the importance of activism. And I think that's why I walk the way I walk.
Well, God, I'm so happy that you are doing that. So I've asked this question before in past episodes, but I think in your case specifically, my friend,
yes,
tell me a moment where you realized you made an impact. Let me just kind of unpack this a little bit.
Yeah.
You were on the first 2 seasons of SVU.
Yes.
So you were opening doors for minorities on TV as an actress. Going further, from all the roles you've done, they're pretty much all very strong female characters. I mean, on Blind Spot, you were not somebody that I'd want to ever sit next to. In fact, I think I may have said this to you. If I didn't meet you in person, I would be like running the other way if I saw you on the train.
I have to say that my favorite interactions with fans is my Blind Spot fans, because every now and then I get a Blind Spot fan that turns around the corner and just stops and just like, and I'm like, it's okay, breathe. Yeah. I'm actually just Michelle, not Shepard.
Because Shepard was just a really scary character.
I love her. She's great.
So you're opening doors for minorities. You're opening doors for women to play strong female leads. Then there's all your work as an activist. You're working to give others a hand up and a voice. Was there one moment with all of that experience that somebody came up to you and shared a moment that really made you go, wow, I really made an impact on them?
Yeah.
It's a big question with everything that you've done.
Because there's a lot. There's a lot. It's interesting because there is, and it's a little bit, I don't generally refer to it at all, because it was something that I really tried to distance myself from when it happened. I had my situation with Cosby.
Right.
It was right out of college. And once again, I knew that I was not I needed to figure out how to make money, and I'm not a good waitress,
Right.
But I was doing stand-in work on the Cosby Show.
Right.
And like many girls, as we all know now, he targeted me, and, he would do these really weird things about, having me come to his dressing room at lunch, and we do these acting exercises, and he was just, grooming me. And he would set it up by like telling you not to talk to any of the other actors. Don't tell them what you're doing. Tell your boyfriend that you're going to be working late. I mean, he really sets the tone so that he can get away with a whole bunch of shit. Growing up as a native New Yorker, I had my little delinquent time. So I was a little punk delinquent for a few years there.
Thank God for it.
Totally. did all my drinking and drugs and all that stuff. And at a certain point, so I didn't do anything. So that was a saving grace, because every time I'd come into his dressing room, he'd always offer me a drink. And I said, I don't drink. But this one time when he said, I'd love to see what your hair is like straightened. So why don't you come to my house tonight, take a shower, and we can straighten your hair. And at that moment, did I feel like, the hair on my neck sort of stand up? And I knew that this was inappropriate. And I told him, no, I'll just come to this studio with my hair straightened. Prior to that, he'd already been doing some strange acting exercises with me, where he would put his hand on your chest and your abdomen, and he'd run circles, and he's touching you. And so there's all that stuff. So there was an afternoon that I was sitting in my place in LA, and I think I was watching The View, and they were talking about the women who were coming forward. And there was this debate about whether they were gold diggers and why were they trying to take down this important Black man. And I was so infuriated. And I called my sister, and I was like, "Bam, this is, pissing me off." And because I had a first perspective scenario. And I said, I'm gonna put it on Facebook. So my personal Facebook, because even in my first personal Facebook, I had people commenting saying those women are all gold diggers, and I was like, you guys can't be ignorant and saying stuff. It's ridiculous. So I wrote my whole story and posted it. I can't even tell you how many women responded and even told their story on mine. Then somebody who was a friend said, I'd really love to release this to my brother or whatever who works for Showbiz Online. And I said, no, it's not for them. It's for my, it's just a private thing. There's already 40 women who are telling their story.
Right.
And he didn't listen. He released it. So that got released. And literally, honey, like within hours, there were people knocking at my front door, calling me, calling my family, harassing us. I mean, it was insane. That next week, I have to say, though, on The View, they actually brought up and they said, well, Michelle Hurd from Law and Order, she tells about her story, and she doesn't need this to progress her career.
Right.
So it was one of those moments in time that my managers and my agents and we had decided back then, because I had told casting, producers, studio, my people, we had told people immediately when it happened.
Right.
Our response, their response was, well, you should be, feel flattered that he's picking you. I mean, it was just terrible. And so I had said to my, people back then, I want to extricate myself from Cosby. I never want my name and his name to be associated. He has nothing to do ever with my career, my choices.
Right.
So that's why I didn't, I stepped away. So cut to these 20, 30 years later, I decided I had to put my name out there to help, first of all, just my friends so they were informed. Then it got released. And I spoke to a few, the lawyers and all that stuff, and I let it be known. I was approached multiple times on the sidewalk, in supermarkets, by women who have been sexually molested. And they told me their story. And they said, because of you, I feel brave enough to speak up. And I thank you for putting yourself out there. And in that moment, I realized that my action was bigger than me wanting to not be associated with Cosby. It was about giving people who don't have a voice or a platform. And I think that's the one moment where I realized I'm strong enough, I'm solid within my own person, that I will step up for those who feel vulnerable. Right. And make their voices heard. I think that was one of the most sort of impactful moments that I realized, like, wow, I didn't realize that by sacrificing, my anonymity or that secret, it empowered other people.
How do you take knowing that you have helped shape and give voice to people who are obviously traumatized, went through a horrible situation? Obviously, you went through a horrible situation as well. But how do you take knowing what you were able to do for all of these other people, probably tons of people that you have never even met or will ever meet? Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do you take that with you in life, and how does that shape you?
Yeah. I think what happens when you do something like that, which, if I, retract, I didn't want to do anything, right? I had said it. I made the statement right when it happened.
Right.
We basically did everything that you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
They didn't respond. They basically shamed us into like, oh, come on, you should be happy, and from that, so then I said, no, cut to, taking the steps and releasing all that information to the public. What I found and what I've learned is that it's more empowering than it is harmful. I think we all think that it's going to, this is going to be it. We'll never be able to work again. People are going to look at me in a different way, blah, 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 blah. It's actually the opposite. It actually, you realize, I can equate it to the success of Oprah, right? Oprah is so successful because she created a forum where she would tell stories or topics that people could relate to.
Right.
People could go, wait, that's me. That's me. She created a forum for that. So when you speak out about it from injustices, you actually empower yourself and everybody else because you galvanize, you inform, you ignite. It's almost like a rally call, standing on a mountain and you're just calling out and people respond to you. And also you realize how you were not wrong. You were receiving actions from somebody who was wrong. And by speaking out, you shine a light on those that are trying to continue to enact wrong actions on others, right?
Right.
Like by speaking out, hopefully you make people, shameful.
Right.
Those people who cause these things generally don't have any shame.
Right.
But you do empower the ones that are being affected, that they can say, so just like the Oprah thing, I was on that episode or something. You know what I mean? Like that was my story.
Right.
She talked about my story. That means that I'm not alone. So I think the real, takeaway, and it's probably why I'm in so many committees right now, is that it just emboldened me to be more brave and to be more determined, to face injustice, to call it out, and to not be kowtowed or intimidated. What can you do to me? What are you going to do to me? Even blacklisting, all that kind of stuff. And you just want to go, look, even if you did that to me speaking out, there's 100 other people who will now speak out.
Right.
And you can't stop us all.
It's like turning on the light with a bunch of cockroaches and they just scatter.
100%. Exactly.
Because nobody wants to put that in the light. It's not about shame. It's just about getting caught.
That's right. That's right.
So I love that. So we've talked about a lot of stuff, which from being minority, mixed race, being a woman, injustice, assault, all of that stuff. And it all falls under the umbrella of representation because this is about personal representation as well. So having said that, how would you define representation, Michelle?
How would I define representation?
Yeah.
That's a good question. Representation, I will again reiterate that it's imperative in this time, 2020, that we represent all of us. If I can, continue to strive to, like, even I just had a conversation with, some of my peoples of Star Trek to make sure that there's a person of color in the hair and makeup room, because I have this opportunity. I have a job. It's my job. I'm part of it. I'm a person of color. I would like to make sure that there's a person of color in the room. And I feel like that's the thing with representation. If we can, at any moment, when we have the opportunity to have that conversation to say, I'm so glad that I'm working in this environment. This is great. However, I need to make sure that we have someone else like me in this room, because it's not enough to have me just here. I need to have me on the other side of the camera as well. In
the writer's room, in the producers, in the director's chair.
Yeah. In the camera department.
Yeah. In the grip, in the electric, everywhere.
Exactly. And that, that's what representation is really fully about. If my personal thing, like I am the crazy lady that will run across the street if I see a little girl or boy with crazy curly hair like mine. I literally will run over and go, hey, I love your hair. It's so cool. Because no one said that to me when I was a kid.
Right.
When I was a kid, this was not cool at all. It should have been straightened. I seek those moments where I can empower and encourage and validate individuals who are not being necessarily included and validated in our society. And that's what representation is really making sure that we're all seen, we're all heard, we're all included, because we're all here.
Right.
We're all here.
I love that. So having all of this coverage that we've talked about, what do you celebrate about your upbringing or your being mixed or being a woman? What do you celebrate?
I celebrate life, truly. I celebrate it in the most full cognitive way as I can. I'm really aware of mortality. I'm one of those that I understand life and death really well. They go completely together. It could also be because my father has passed. He passed 15 years ago. And so when you lose someone, you're really aware of time and how valuable time is, how precious it is. Not to be, bring it back to my show, but, our show also talks about the sanctity and the preciousness and vulnerability of life and love and support. I've always found that my favorite thing about life is learning things, is the journey of discovery, of
Agreed.
Possibly being wrong and possibly failing hugely. I mean, it's fantastic. You want to be able to learn and to grow and to expand your horizons and eat up everything that life gives you, because we're here now. And
time is so short.
It's so short. It's so fleeting. It's so
Right.
fast. So there's a concept, I think, especially in our youth, that tomorrow is sort of like everlasting. Like, oh, tomorrow I have so much long time. I can't wait till I'm an old person sitting on a porch on a rocking chair. You don't have tomorrow promised. You have today. So live, embrace, explore. As an artist, it's the most fulfilling thing that you can do, to read something different, to look at something different, to listen to something different, to interact with people who are different, because it feeds your perception, which is the same thing as to why it's important to have different people in every conversation. It broadens it.
Whatever it is that you want to do, don't wait. You just got to run for it.
That's right. Do something. Even if nobody ever heard of it or sees it or whatever,
right.
Do something.
Listen, we can all sit and complain about how this is wrong, but we have to take some accountability and responsibility. If we're just sitting on the sidelines belly aching about it,
right,
we're just as responsible.
You're part of the problem then. You're actually part of the problem.
Right.
Exactly.
I'd rather fail in the most spectacular way than to be on my last breath and go,
that's right.
Well, what if,
Exactly.
And I just want to do what I can to push good people forward and push any sort of positive contribution forward.
And this is part of life. Why not engage?
Right.
Why not engage?
Right. So give me our signature sign off, Michelle.
Okay, this is a tricky one. I was trying to think of something good, and then I was like, just let it go, Michelle. Just say whatever you want.
All right. So lay it on me, girl. Let us know who you are and what you represent.
My name is Michelle Hurd, and I represent all the curly-haired, crazy, multi-ethnic creatures out there with resilience and tenacity, empathy, and love.
With love and thanks to the incredible Michelle Hurd for being my guest. Be sure to check her out on Star Trek Picard on CBS All Access and keep up with her on Twitter. Her handle is @It's Michelle Hurd. Next up, she was named One to Watch by People magazine. She's a comedian, host, writer, and actress. She can be seen on Good Trouble as Alice Kwan. Sherry Cola stops in.
This is Sherry Cola, stand-up comic and actress, and this is Reppin.
Reppin can be found on Apple Podcast, Stitcher, and TuneIn. So subscribe, leave us a review, and share. We want to hear from you, so you can tweet us at Reppin Podcast and follow us on Instagram at Reppin_podcast. Thanks to my team, my technical director and musical composer, Nelson Pinero, and always to Gracie Kong for her joy and love. Reppin is a Suburban Outlaw Productions. Be well and be safe. Until next time, stand up and represent.